Hello, and welcome to Sientir Presents, I guess I'm going to call this, because it's a presentation with a slideshow. And this is the inaugural one, so expect things to be a little rough as I kind of figure out how I'm doing this. So I recently watched Infinity War, I guess part one, and so I wanted to analyze Thanos' motivations a little bit. So there will be, I'm not necessarily going to go into a whole lot of the plot of the story, but there are some spoilers in terms of like the main villain's motivations and stuff like that. So just as a heads up, I figure getting a spoiler warning out of the way first, probably a good idea. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. And at this point, since I've clicked on it and gotten focused where I need it, it should go pretty smoothly. So I've broken this up into a few parts, few being 7. And the first part is just going over what Thanos' goal and motivation are. So we know that he wants all 6 Infinity Stones, and he wants them to be able to kill half of all sapient life in the galaxy, which seems pretty harsh. But he wants to kill half of all sapient life in the galaxy because he believes doing so will save the other half from suffering and death that would be caused by running out of resources. And he believes that this will happen, this particular suffering and whatnot, and therefore as a justification for the mass genocide, because it happened to his homeworld of Titan. So just to kind of quickly go over this again. He wants the Infinity Stones to be able to kill half of all sapient life in the galaxy. It's not quite framed that way, but I assume he's not killing off cows and other livestock and trees and whatnot. And so he wants to kill off half of all the sapient life in the galaxy because he believes it's necessary to save the other half from suffering and death from running out of resources. And he justifies and feels that this is necessary because what happened to his homeworld of Titan was running out of resources and whatnot. So moving on to the next part, just kind of going over this fear that is at the heart of Thanos' motivation. It's kind of a modern fear. So we have a fear of running out of resources, especially food. That's not a new concept. Famines historically have been a huge problem. But the idea that the global population is going to exceed our global food supply, it's a more recent idea. And it's based upon the increases that we've seen in population growth over the past couple hundred years, where if you look at charts of like population of Earth, you'll see that it really has grown quite considerably over the past 200 years or so, as all sorts of things have changed to allow people to live longer and that sort of thing. And so we want to kind of examine, is Thanos a hero or a villain, right? So he has this motivation of believing his actions are necessary to save people. And I think that makes him a more sort of compelling sort of villain. He's not straightforwardly evil. There's some ambiguity about whether or not he's a hero or a villain. And part of this comes from the fact that he's not motivated by selfish desire. Villains are, in a traditional sense, are motivated by some sort of desire to gain power for themselves, to gain some sort of rule or something like that. But this is more of a holy mission. To Thanos, it's a holy mission that's necessary for him to complete, and that's regardless of the cost to himself. He's not doing this gathering the Infinity Stones, randomly kill half the population, for himself, but he believes it's necessary to save people. It's a very harsh way of doing it, but he believes it's necessary. So he has heroic motivations, that is saving people, preventing suffering, but he's misguided. So he has a misguided quest. It's very short-sighted. It's just starting off with this first point. He assumes that this running out of resources that happened on his homeworld is inevitable everywhere. He believes that this is an inevitability, that this is what's going to happen, that eventually sapient species will consume their resources. And the sort of suffering that he saw on his homeworld, and the sort of death and basically apocalypse that came about due to resource overconsumption, he assumes that that's inevitable everywhere. And he also assumes that the only solution is to kill half of the population of sapient beings. That's why that's the only solution, I don't know, but that's the conclusion he's come to. And I'll go into both of these in these next parts. So let's just start with resources here in part 5. So in our world, starvation is largely due to problems with resource distribution, not availability of resources. So we're going to kind of examine this from what we know from our world and the things that happened here. So we also have some additional piece of information. The rate of population growth has actually been slowing. So resources are not actually too scarce to supply food for everyone. And it's just that we're really bad at distributing it well. And population growth rates have actually been kind of decreasing. Evidence shows that decreasing child mortality rates and increasing education, especially for women, and access to contraceptives all contribute to decreasing birth rates. So a continual unchecked population growth in terms of quantity is pretty unlikely. In other words, the rate of population growth, the number of living people, will kind of plateau. And what's going to eventually happen effectively is that birth rates and death rates will kind of reach an equilibrium. Where exactly that kind of falls out, I'm not exactly sure. But there's a bunch of projections you can look up online. I think the Gates Foundation may have talked about this some. But what we've seen is that in places like, for example, Africa, that have historically had higher rates of child mortality, that as medical care improves and child mortality goes down, families are wanting to have fewer children. And additionally, because the children that they're having are surviving long enough. And additionally, improving education and contraceptives enable that, as well as providing some additional motivation. So, in other words, Thanos' assumption that overpopulation, that is, too many people compared to the number of resources available, is inevitable, is proving false in real-world data. So the fear that that's kind of based off of is proving to actually not be, in the long run, something that's going to occur, similar to Y2K, for those who are familiar with that. So let's kind of look at his solutions as well. So if overpopulation is a looming problem, then killing half of the population is only a temporary solution. Eventually, breeding, as it were, will restore that population, and the problem will return. So if it is going to actually occur, it's a big if, given what we know from our real world, then killing half the population only delays the problem, as I was saying, and you'd kind of have to regularly kill people at regular intervals, which seems pretty terrible. And additionally, he has, I don't even know how much power and what he could do with the full power of his Infinity Gauntlet with all the stones in it. But I assume, I would think that there would be better solutions he could come up with than this sort of mass genocide. So just to kind of conclude, Thanos' belief that everyone will suffer and society will collapse due to overpopulation causing intense resource problems is based on the events of his homeworld, and assuming that those problems will happen everywhere is an unproven assumption. And real-world data indicates that what actually happened on Titan was an anomaly, not an inevitability. That is, it's unlikely that it will continue to occur elsewhere, and that he's being motivated by events that were extremely unlikely. And on top of that, even if overpopulation will be a problem, it's not yet. He's jumping at it a bit early, and on top of that, it's a very temporary solution, and that kind of makes it a poor solution overall. So his flawed thinking, though, is what makes him a villain instead of a hero. He has a positive goal, preventing mass suffering and death due to a lack of resources relative to total population, and his determination and willingness to self-sacrifice in the pursuit of this goal, those are both heroic traits. Combining heroic traits and heroic goal with flawed thinking and methodology are good ways to create a deeper, complex, and more compelling villain. I really think that he works well as a villain because of this. So that's kind of my thoughts on this. So I'd like to hear what you have to think as well. And please consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/Sientir. And until next time, everyone, take care. Bye-bye.